Summertime is always busy on Sodor. The engines are constantly moving backwards and forwards in the heat, with trains of tourists, fruits, and other treats for the hot season. James was returning to the yard after taking a short express to Elsbridge. At the level crossing, he met Percy. "What are you doing here, Percy?" he asked. "You should be at the yard." "I know. There was a mix-up and Henry left these cars behind, and Sir Topham Hatt asked me to take them." "That's no excuse. All I care about is you being back in time to shunt my train." And James huffed importantly away. "If all you care about is yourself, then why did you bother asking?" muttered Percy as he left the junction. When James arrived at the yard, he found Thomas bustling about with some freight cars. "Those cars aren't for my train, are they?" asked James. "As a matter of fact, they are. Douglas was supposed to take them, but he's stuck on the turntable, so you'll have to pull them with your train." "Ugh," said James. "Not more freight cars. I should only be pulling passenger trains." Thomas, who was too upset to answer, biffed James's train together and left in a huff. James's mood didn't improve, and the heat didn't help. The cars behaved well, but James biffed them so much they were determined to pay him out. James arrived at the station, left his cars, and prepared to take his next train. He sat angrily at the station with his coaches. The passengers didn't dare look at him, and James became even more angry. How dare they look away and not notice my paintwork? Such rude things passengers are, he huffed. The guard blew his whistle, and James huffed out with a jerk. "Don't be so rough, don't be so rough," said the coaches, but James ignored them and continued to pick up speed. He arrived at Crovan's gate in time for Skarloey's train. "You look upset, James. What's the matter?" asked Skarloey. "All this heat is making me uncomfortable, and to top it off, the other engines are so slow, I'm starting off late and have to go fast to make up for lost time. You're just too impatient. The other engines have a lot of work too, you know." "Not as much as I do," said James crossly. "Likely they have more work to do, but I'd be more careful about the signalmen if I were you." "Why?" asked James. "They sit in the same box all day or all night with little fresh air in the blazing heat. If you're not careful, they won't know you're there, and you'll be sent on the wrong line. Now I must go. Remember what I said," said Skarloey, and he chuffed away. The whistle blew, and James left as well. That night, James had to take a goods train to the harbor. His driver woke him up early, and James set off to the yard. The train was waiting for him when he got there. The temperature was beginning to rise. The yard was dim and quiet, with only one light on at the station. One lone workman was waiting for them. "This is going to the harbor, right?" inquired James's driver. "Yes, but the signalmen on the line are struggling to stay awake in this heat. Make sure you whistle longer and closer so they hear you." "Right. Away we go, James." James, who hadn't been paying much attention, chuffed out of the yard with his train. The rails hummed as the night train sped along. The occasional station provided the only lights along the line as James trundled along with the goods train. Soon, they saw the signal box to send them to the harbor line. James whistled loudly, and the signalman set the points. James's wheels clattered over the crossing as they began the latter half of the journey. The driver and fireman watched carefully as they rushed along the dark line. Farther ahead was a signal box. The signalman had set the points straight, but forgot to turn the lights on. As James approached, he and his crew didn't see the darkened signal box in the night, and didn't whistle. But the signalman heard James rush by, and mistakenly changed the points. The line split towards an old station and siding, but James didn't know that. He clattered over the points, and began heading down the old line. "We should be approaching the harbor soon," said his driver. But the harbor lights were nowhere to be seen. Soon they approached the coast, but they realized something was wrong. "I hear the boats, but I can't see the lights," said James, nor could his driver or fireman. When they saw the old station, James braked hard, but it was too late. No one was hurt, but James was bruised and confused. "What happened?" he asked wearily. "I have no idea," said his driver. In the morning, news from the harbor reached Sir Topham Hatt. James never arrived with his train. A search party was constructed, and they took to the skies on Harold the helicopter. They searched along the line until at last they found James. "There he is," said Harold. Harold landed close by to James. "Are you all right?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. "Yes, but we don't know what happened," said the driver. "We found the signalman hadn't turned his lights on, so you never saw his signal box in the night," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "The heat must have gotten to him," said James. "I know it got to me." "Indeed, it's been quite the summer. Boko and Edward will soon arrive with the breakdown crew. We'll take your driver and fireman back to the station and Harold." It wasn't long before Edward, Boko, and the crane arrived. They hauled James back onto the rails, and Boko shunted him to the works. A few days later, James returned to the yard. The temperature was getting lower every day, and the tourists soon became more and more scarce. He saw Thomas and Percy in the yard. "Hello, James. Feeling better?" "Yes, I am," he replied. "I'm sorry for being rude." "That's okay," said Percy. "The heat was getting everyone in a bad mood," said Thomas. "You should have heard Gordon complaining about working in Vicarstown." The engines all laughed and went back to work.